Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today we're looking at a Hinderer knife, which is not the XM18. And really that's almost weird. You know, as someone who's been around the knife community for quite a few years, it almost feels strange to say Hinderer and not follow that by XM18. Although over the last few years, Hinderer has been, making a fairly decided and determined push to expand their product line. For many years, you would basically talk about the XM18 and the XM24. The Eclipse was around as well, but people didn't really talk that much about it. Nowadays, you have many, many more. There's the half track, the Jurassic, the Maximus, the full track, which is not released yet to my knowledge. Maybe it is, and I'm just behind the 8-ball. The MP1. Then, of course, we've got this Firetac. There are also variations on the XM18. There's the slip joint as well as the 3-inch. And I don't know about you guys. I always feel like the XM18 3-inch should be, I don't know, what are we doing? Multiples of 3. So let's do like the XM15 or the XM12 or something like that. Anyway, that's a little bit besides the point. But my point is that, Hinderer has absolutely been trying to expand their lineup and offer a few more things. And the Firetac is one of those efforts. And this is a bit of a departure in that it's definitely slimmer and leaner and a little bit lighter, although it's not really super lightweight. But this is sort of like the Hinderer for Endura fans. Okay, and if you're not familiar with the Spyderco Endura, it's sort of a long, slim slicer style blade. Now, we'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the blade, but let's focus on the Firetac for a moment and ask the question, is this, as a new product offering, is this something that works? Is this going to perhaps be compelling enough, Hinderer-esque enough to, compel XM18 owners to buy one? Is it perhaps because it's a departure from that sort of heavy duty, thick, overbuilt style of knife? And I say that, but it really isn't. But, it certainly has a slimmer shape and a slimmer profile. Is it going to attract those who are maybe not huge fans of the XM18? And, that's probably debatable. And I'll save for my conclusions sort of where I come down on this. But I would like to talk to you. If you're an XM18 fanboy, if you just love the XM18, what do you think about this knife? Is this something that you feel like you really need to have in your collection? If, on the other hand, you're not in love with the XM18, is this a knife that may compel you to switch over and try a Hinderer knife? Because I will say this, all right, I've always been impressed with the precision of the XM18, that everything is put together in a way that is very confidence inspiring. It's very strong, it's very secure, it's very precise, carefully put together. And this absolutely has those Hinderer qualities. It feels like a Hinderer from a construction standpoint, okay? And so if you like that, but you're not in love with the XM18 or 24, I don't know. So I would put that question out there to you guys. What do you think of this on the basis of, whether you're a Hinderer fan or not, whether you're an XM18 fan or not? I'd love to get some feedback on that. Now let's get to the size and weight on this guy. That's always something important. This is a little longer than an XM18 at 8 5/16 inches. So only a 1/16 of an inch more, but nonetheless, it is a little bit more. 3 9/16 on the blade length. 4 11/16 on the handle. I know, I hope you guys are fairly comfortable with your with your imperial measurements. The handle is going to be 7/16 of an inch thick, and it weighs in at 4.1 ounces. So that's still only about half an ounce lighter than a standard XM18. By the way, I did have someone ask me the other day, and I need to go back and reply to their comment, why, although I'm a Canadian, do I use imperial measurements? Well, because I do a lot of construction work, and even in Canada, construction work is largely done outside of industrial, commercial construction. Residential construction is almost exclusively done in the imperial system rather than the metric. So I know metric, I'm quite comfortable with it. I grew up with it in school. I was able to use it when I was in college doing blueprints and stuff. A lot of those commercial projects would all be in metric. But when I'm talking about knives in a casual, giving casual measurements where I'm trying to have just a general sense, I'm definitely, I can imagine how big an inch is probably a little more accurately than I can imagine how much 10 centimeters is, let's say. Okay, so now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's continue. So that's the size and weight on this guy. And so it's a little bit lighter than an XM18. It's a little bit longer, but it's not... I guess the shape is the primary thing that's different, okay? And as I say, there are still some Hinderer or some XM18 components here, and I guess Hinderer components here that if you're familiar with the XM18 or 24 or Eclipse or other models, you'll probably recognize. So let's go ahead now that we've got the size and weight kind of covered and talk a little bit about this blade. This blade is kind of an interesting thing. It is, longer and a little bit slimmer. There's sort of this high-ish flat grind here, but it's still a pretty thick, pretty stout blade designed to be fairly tough and durable. Okay, this is not the blade from, say, a Spyderco Enduro, which is super thin and super slicey. This is thin enough. Okay, it's about 20, I wrote it down somewhere here. It's 23 thousandths behind the edge on all of the straight edge here. Now, as we come up to the point, it does thicken up a bit to 27 thousandths. And none of those numbers, are really bad, okay? I think, the average knife that I measure is between 20 and 25 thousandths. Every once in a while you get a really thinly ground knife that's under 20 thousandths, and every once in a while you get a thicker one that's, closer to 30 or 40 thousandths. But, so this kind of lands in the middle of the road in terms of how thick the edge is behind, or how thick the blade is behind the edge. That's measured directly behind the secondary bevel. The stock here is 140 thousandths, which is just a little thicker than a Para 2. So if you're familiar with Paramilitary 2 stock, which I know many of you are, then that'll kind of give you an idea of what you're dealing with here. So how does this blade perform? Well, it's not the sliciest blade that's ever existed, for sure. But in terms of, actually going out and using this knife, I've been very, very pleased with it. I cannot offer any big complaint on initial inspection. And I had a couple people mention this too, that they kind of looked at one of these and thought the blade seemed a little thick. Honestly, not that bad. I've only cut a couple of apples with it, and the apples were fine, but probably if you're going to cut a carrot or a beet, something that breaks even more readily than an apple, you might not pull it off, okay? Now, let me add here that, that kind of thin, slicey blade has a place, and I get why some people really like it, but I'm not even sure that place is in an EDC knife. Generally speaking, for my EDC knife, I want something a little more robust, okay? If I'm going to cut an apple, I'm usually in the kitchen and I can grab a kitchen knife right there. Where I'm concerned is, what if I need to stick my knife blade behind something and wiggle it open? Or, what if I'm out in the bush and I want to do something that, that's where, I carry a knife for those extra difficult things that might come up. And so I lean toward a blade that's a little thicker. I still need it to cut stuff. Don't get me wrong. I'm not willing to compromise on that at all. And you've heard me make that comment about Striders. I find them to be inordinately thick behind the edge and therefore not very good at just average cutting tasks. And that's where I feel like, that's where it becomes an issue. So getting back to this blade here, I actually find it quite useful for, your everyday type of stuff. And, in my use, did not have any complaints about it whatsoever. Even with some light food prep, it was good enough to get that done. Let's go ahead now and talk about lockup and deployment. So as you can see, this is a titanium frame lock. We've got a stainless steel lock bar insert here, which is a departure for Hinderer. Teflon washers, which is not a departure for Hinderer. And I'm not sure if these are available. Someone can comment down below if these are available with the tri-way pivot or not. If they are, that's pretty cool. If not, I don't feel like that's the end of the world either. The deployment method is a thumb disc right here. Let you see that. and it works quite nicely. I find it, it catches my thumb really well. The detent is quite well set up, so this knife does flick open quite nicely. If you want to open it slowly, you can still do that. But most of us test by kind of the flick, and this knife works quite well for flicking a knife open. Or I mean, this disc works quite well for flipping the blade open. Now, I will say, if you kind of imagine you're cutting material here, you can sort of see how that disc could get in the way. But I'm gonna again be just a little bit contrary, okay? I know a lot of people are really, really picky about a thumb disc or thumb stud or whatever getting in the cutting path. Honestly, I always review knives by just carrying them and cutting stuff with them, right? I don't like go out of my way to find tests that will make a knife fail, and I don't avoid things that the knife might not be good at. I just try to use it in my regular life, and if I notice something, then I talk about it. All right, and in all of the years that I've been doing this, I have never once said to myself, man, that thumb disc or thumb stud for that matter is in my way and I can't cut this. Right? That's never happened to me. So I kind of feel like that's a point that reviewers bring up because they're reviewers, and it never actually becomes a problem in real life. Okay, so that's that's my rant on thumb discs over. I know a lot of people don't like thumb discs for that very reason. I don't mind them, and I certainly don't mind this one. It is nice and textured, so it catches your thumb pretty well. And for me, the knife opens consistently and easily, and basically that's what I'm looking for, right? The knife opens when I want it to open, it closes when I want it to close, and so in that respect, it gets a pass. The action is quite smooth. Again, something we've come to expect from Hinderer at this point. Whatever you think about the Teflon washers, I'm not a fan. In my XM18, I switched them out. I no longer have an XM18, and that's, well, I'll save this till the end of the video. So hang on until I include the XM18 into our discussion here. So do I like the deployment method? Yeah, I have no problem at all with this deployment method. It seems to work just fine. The lock is easy to actuate. The blade flips out when I want it to. So as far as all of that goes, I'm quite happy. Now, let's talk a little about construction and ergonomics. And if you're familiar with, the XM18, the XM24, the Eclipse, you're familiar with this construction. It is basically built like most of the Hinderer knives that you have seen and played with. Even the clip is going to be the same shape. The one thing is it's going to be right side tip up or down only. There's no milling out internally. It's standoff construction. Again, all things we're quite familiar with from Hinderer. We've got Torx construction, and I have no doubt, although this is not my knife, so I didn't take it apart, but I have no doubt that this would come apart as easily as any XM18, and that's one of the huge features of the XM18. They are so easy to take apart and fit beautifully back together that's one of the real joys of owning one. And so I'm quite happy with the construction. It's very confidence inspiring. What about, though, the ergonomics? And this is where this knife falls down for me just a little. It's not terrible. Like it's not uncomfortable in hand at all. It's actually quite comfortable. And, in use, I had no issues whatsoever. There's no hot spots. There's nothing that makes me say, oh man, this knife is really bad. However, having owned about 5 XM18s at this point, I should say, I love the ergonomics on the XM18. It is perfect as far as I'm concerned. It just is a knife that molds so well to your hand. And this knife does not do that quite as well. Okay, it's still good, it's still comfortable, but every time I get this knife in hand, I think it's not an XM18. It's not quite as good and quite as confidence inspiring as an XM18 is, which I will say the ergonomics on the XM is outstanding. It truly is, an exceptional example of what good ergonomics should be. All right, so that's my discussion of all the various components. Let me get some comparisons in here. I want to start and finish with one particular knife in general, and that is the Chris Reeve knives Inkosi. And the reason I want to start and finish with this knife is because the Firetac to me feels like it's trying to do what the Inkosi has done, which is strike a really nice balance between a knife being usable and carryable and unobtrusive while still being tough and durable and reliable. And I think it really pulls it off, but I think the Inkosi does it just a fraction of a hair better. Okay, now if you're a huge fan of the Firetac, TJ, I'm sorry I have to say this, but I pride myself on my honesty in my videos, and so I do have to say I do prefer the Inkosi over the Firetac. For a couple of reasons, largely the blade related reasons. Okay, I think this very gentle hollow grind is a better way of achieving a tough blade that still cuts well than the flat grind option is, or the partial flat grind. And I think the Inkosi is a little prettier as well. The pattern here on the handle puts me off a little bit. Now, I'm debating whether or not I do a full comparison video of these two. Let me know in the comments whether or not you think I should. Okay, so let me get this guy out of the way and bring in some other comparisons that I think fit into a similar vein. For sure, the Mass Drop Crux kind of fits into that heavy duty, but still really good cutting tool type of mentality. The Curtis F3 is definitely more comparable with the XM18, but I thought I'd bring it in just because we're talking about, heavy duty knives that are designed to really be able to take a lot of abuse and really stand up well to use. And so, yeah, the F3 absolutely does that. A knife that's a little, maybe in a similar vein, price point is very similar, size and weight is very similar, overall sort of slimness is similar. This, of course, is the Olemic Cutlery Swish, which I think is a beautiful knife and one of my favorite knife designs, okay? I absolutely love this design. I don't know if there's anything that stands out in my mind that I would say I prefer. I find this to be an absolutely beautiful, yet still highly functional cutting tool. And then finally, let me bring in a Para 2. And again, the reason I'm bringing in the Para 2 is because, Hinderer is aiming at something that a lot of regular budget level production knives tend to aim at, which is being versatile, being that one knife that can be in the pocket for everything all the time. And the Para 2 certainly pulls that off pretty well. The blade is maybe a little bit, sensitive, if you will. But people are very familiar with it. And this does bring home one of the issues with the Para 2, and that is, look at the extra blade length you're getting on the Firetac. So anyway, wanted to bring that in as one last comparison. Overall, what are my thoughts on this knife? Does it offer something that's compelling enough to bring people in who are maybe not fans of Hinderer's other designs? His knives, even all the other ones on the list that I mentioned, still tend to be pretty beefy, heavy-duty looking designs, all right? This one is the biggest departure from that in that it's trying to be slimmer and leaner. The blade is kind of long and lean here. And so is this compelling enough to bring non-Hinderer fans in, or maybe get someone to try a Hinderer that wouldn't normally do so? I kind of hope that it is. Okay, and hopefully they will get this knife in hand and recognize the excellent level of quality that it has attained. Okay, what stands out to me about this knife is, and it stands out about XM18s, and I'm sure other Hinderer models, is there's just this precision about them that says to me that a knife to be heavy duty and hard use and rugged doesn't have to be sloppy. Okay, and so that's, there's a feel that these Hinderer knives have that is just about precision and quality. And I've got to say, this does have that feel. Where it really falls down to me is, and I'll admit, I'm an XM18 fanboy. Okay, so I'm coming from that perspective a little bit, and that is certainly going to bias my opinion on this knife. There's no question. And when I hold this knife, that's what comes to mind for me first. This is not an XM18. And that's not entirely fair, guys. It really isn't. So had I never handled an XM18, would I be thinking differently about this knife? Possibly. All right. But here's what I would say about this knife. If you're a Hinderer fan and you like the way Hinderer builds things and you like the way Hinderer grinds blades, blinds grades. Wow, I can't even speak English. Grinds blades. You will really like this knife if you want something a little slimmer and easier in the pocket. Okay. If you already are madly in love with your XM18, you carry it all the time and you have no complaint about its size or weight or anything else, then you probably will want to stick to it over this knife, although I could be wrong. Okay, so that's my overall take. It's great, but true XM18 fans probably will be a little disappointed in it. Hinderer fans, though, who want that Hinderer style in a slimmer package, I think you'll absolutely love it. Thanks for watching. Rick Hinderer, thanks for making these cool knives. You have a lot of models that I'm really interested in. And if you guys haven't tried a Hinderer, it's worth, especially where they're a little more affordable now. The bubble is kind of gone away. I'm not saying they're cheap at all. They're not. But they are good knives. And at that price point, I'm pretty happy with the work that Hinderer is doing in the knives they're offering. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I guess you got to hit the notification button as well if you want to know when videos go up. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.